This is the Curriculum and Evaluation Committee. It is Monday night, June 18th, and we are at 6 o'clock, and we are in the North High School boardroom. And we're called to order at 6:05. Ms. Van Twyver is present. Mrs. Raymond is present. Ms. Timmons. Ms. Porter?
Here.
She's here, and she will have the vote this evening if we take a vote. We have Dr. McKinney. We have Ms. Hohensi. And Mr. Kaufman. Hey, did I miss anybody?
No.
Wow. It's got to be summer. Okay, on the agenda this evening, we have three topics. One are curriculum needs, the summer reading program follow-up, and a review of the student performance. So Dr. McKinney is going to start the ball rolling.
So included in your packet is the meeting follow-up from our May meeting in regards to the textbook adoption schedule, and this first page is a summary of our current expenditures at the elementary, middle, and high school levels, and then our projected costs. And I'm sharing this with you, although we're not completely at a place of putting together a schedule. Just kind of gives an overview of the needs of the district in a number of curriculum areas and the overall capacity of the budget. I know we're not at a place where the budget is finalized, but certainly a lot of this comes down to the bottom line. How much money is available? How much can we spend? There are some, I met with all the department head teachers, sent me their needs, both in a priority order. I went to two head teacher meetings, one at South, one at North. There's a group that would like to meet and kind of look at a blended use of materials, both textbook and some online materials, utilizing technology and Chromebooks. But one of the challenges is, for example, if we spend $150,000 in one department area, that's a big chunk of money that's going to be used, and then all the other areas are kind of sitting idle for a year. So what I'm trying to get to a place of looking at the needs of everyone and how can I meet some or if not all of the needs in those areas. You can see that there's some that aren't listed here going forward, the literacy pilot at elementary, science and social studies at the elementary, the exact costs for the middle school next gen science pilot, some additional costs that have come in the last couple days. While Study Sync is not listed, the middle schools are asking for some novels to go with Study Sync so that when kids are studying, for example, The Outsiders, they can read the complete text and not just excerpts from the program. If we go specifically down to the high school level, ELA, they're looking for continuing money to replace the paperback novels that they go through and actually replace them. It's called permabound. They're like hardcover, more durable paperback books that will last longer, a little more durable. Math, some of their requests include pre-calc, calculus, and algebra. Science, they're asking for materials for AP Physics and Bio. Social Studies was up for some books for U.S. and world history. They're agreeable to spreading that over 2 years because you can see that's a large sum, as well as they have needs in the areas of civics, economics, anthropology, sociology. So I guess in the end, you can foresee the challenge that is there. I'd like all departments to get something and be moving forward. There's also a need for some of the courses that run at the high school that are the middle school that are high school credits. They need the same materials that are at the high school brought to the middle school as well, so there's a duplicate there. So in the end, I'm trying to address all of these needs. I'm just waiting for the budget process to kind of come to a close, and then just work my way through the budget process and appropriate money as necessary. But this, I think, gives a nice picture of where we are now and where we're going.
Okay, so the lady that was in the Ed Council complaining about her
World language.
her Spanish books, right?
Yep. That's
So
part
she's
of-
under, so none of the, you haven't committed any of these monies to any one particular subject? It's, math is, you're going to spend $30,000 on books, or it's not like it's going to be, well, maybe it's algebra books or calculus books or something at the high school? You
Right,
haven't-
I'm not down to the specifics yet. Again, it kind of comes down to the bottom line, if you will, and how much money's there and how much is allocated for other things. I can come back and report how that money's going to be spent out. Some departments, like they said in the Ed Council meeting, haven't received funding in a number of years. So instead of the all or nothing approach, I'm trying to share the wealth across all departments, and let's all get better together and use the best materials we can find. So that's kind of where I am now, and once the budget turns over, I'll have a better idea of which of these kind of expenditures will be specific to what
And
exact course.
this total amount of money will not be spent over 1 year, it'll be over 5 years, 4 years, 3 years? How many?
We're, by level, you mean, the 262, or are you looking
The
at?
whole total. I mean, have you thought about how you're going to pay for this? Is it going to be, certain topics in 1 year, or a certain elementary, middle school, or high school in 1 year? Or, you can't pay it all in 1 year, I'm sure, right? Or,
That's where I'm getting to. Pretty much all the departments want it now, so it's a
course.
question of what can be in that budget. I'm not going to speak to whatever the budget's going to be, but if you add up that column there, you're at, 330 before we get into some of the other things that are built into the budget, like iReady, like some other expenditures that typically happen annually.
so hopefully in August, you'll be able to say, will you be by August?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because
And
that's July, we're coming up pretty soon, July or August. Any
If
other
not,
questions?
could I just make a caveat to that?
Yeah.
If not August, September, because some of the departments have put in for PD work to meet in August and look at some of the materials and then finalize kind of like their proposals. So it would be in that August, September timeframe.
Okay,
But ideally, they would like it, obviously, for day one with kids.
of course.
Yep.
Being proactive would be nice, huh? Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. What's the turnaround time for ordering books? So once we finish the budget process, and we know how much money there is, and you're able to prioritize, how long does it typically take between when you decide what you're going to order and when kids actually can access it?
It certainly depends on the vendor. The ones that we use that we already have relationships with, they're faster, I would say 3 weeks. So like Houghton Mifflin's already in district, some of the other larger ones. But if you're going to someplace unique that like we haven't ordered before, it would be a longer period of time.
Ms. Porter, do you have a question? I don't know which one's first, but we'll do ladies first. Ms. Mohensi?
Thank you. I'm trying to understand your chart. You've got $500,000 on the first column and $380,000 in the second column. Are they current needs, projected needs? I can't differentiate between how you've divided this up to understand it.
Well, the second column is titled current, so if you go down that column, those are the current expenditures in this year's budget that was spent. And then projected, the third column to the right, would be projected costs going forward, and those are all totaled up by level. So you see at least $70,000 at elementary, but not including the literacy pilot or projected costs for FY20. Next Gen Science Kits, Social Studies, the same for the final cost for Next Gen next year. And then some of the specific costs as I outlined by content area, math, science, history, and world language.
When you say current budget, do you mean this current year or next year's proposed budget?
So the current budget we're working out of is FY18, and the projected would be FY19 and beyond.
Okay, thank you very much.
Susan, Ms. Porter?
Thank you. So you just said not including the literacy pilot at elementary level, so if there's not enough money, that might not happen? Is that what you're saying?
So for FY19, the pilot's going to happen.
It's definitely going to
Yep.
happen.
So
Okay.
the publishers, well, most of the publishers are very generous in giving us the materials at no cost, but there are some that are charging. The year after that, if we were to adopt some of those materials, there would be a cost impact to the budget.
Okay.
So if you were to, these projected costs could be spread over a number of years, but there's an urgency at some levels to get materials fairly soon. So it's about addressing some of the needs urgently and quickly, and then as well as kind of having like a long-term plan.
So as far as priorities, you would say that the elementary phonics materials would, I would think, be a very high priority. Once the pilot and there's something to adopt, we'd want to get that in place as soon as possible, I would think.
In FY20, yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. A couple of questions. What is the current budget proposal from the administration? How much money allocated for textbooks?
I didn't bring that sheet with me. It's usually around $100,000, $120,000.
Because I recall, and Ms. Van Twyver, or maybe Ms. Horns still remember, I remember when Ms. Krebs was here, she presented us a 3 or even a 5-year plan about what the anticipated needs were going to be. And I recall something like $600,000 was in one of those budgets. So $100,000, even $150,000 for textbooks. I mean, I think I would, maybe you can have this information when we meet in the Budget Committee in 2 weeks, is what the history has been for spending for textbooks over the last several years. Because if we were at 600 and now the budget proposal is 150, then that's something I would like to know. Oh, I didn't. Please direct me to.
Fiscal year.
So what exactly am I looking at?
So it would be the book line. It's right here. It says books.
Okay, next to last.
$254,000. That's what's projected for next year.
So, but what you've given us is $380,000. What you're showing us is a cost of potentially $380,000. So what you're showing us on the slide and what you've handed out to us are quite inconsistent. Or is this just the high school? That 254 number,
Where are you
that's
getting
just
the
the high
380?
school?
What's your 380 number from?
I'm adding 70, 48, and 262, and I come up with 380,000.
And that's the challenge. There's not capacity for 380 in the 254 line. So if you're going to continue.
Well, you've answered the question. So my question was 254 is currently in the budget. That's what the question was. May I ask that as you do this and continue to evolve this, that you go 2, 3, and even 5 years out? 2 years, well, you have only the current and 1 year out. Like I said, Ms. Krebs, they knew when the books were going to really peak in terms of either content or actual physical ability to use them. You know how beat up they get. So they need to be replaced and wholesale often. I would appreciate a longer projection, because you did point out that this literacy, you've identified it for FY20.
Again, as I stated, this is FY18, the middle column, and projected is FY19 going forward. I haven't developed or outlined where these funds are going to be going forward. I'm just letting you know where the needs are going forward. And I don't want to be limited to giving large chunks to small number of departments. I'd like to share the wealth across a number. So
I agree with the
when I get to a
philosophy
place,
I agree with your approach. What I'm asking for is something that goes out more than the next budget year, which is more like 2 or 3
projected
years.
means more than 1 year. So when I get
No,
to
you identified it as 18, 19, when you said column 3 was 18, 19.
FY19 and beyond,
Yeah, you
and
did
like
say
I
that.
said, literacy pilot, FY20.
Okay.
In any case,
So
oops, go
I do have a question about the history, social studies. You said there was a need for civics books, and I have to ask you to check on that, because we approved civics books last year. Everybody thought it was the greatest, most wonderful civics book they have ever seen. It was internet connected, blah, blah, blah. I voted against it because it didn't have an index. I thought that was a rather yeah, your frown record is exactly the way I felt. It did not, that book we approved for civics did not have an index and a poorly done table of contents as well. So we spent over $110,000 just last fiscal year, I think, or maybe it was, Mr. Boucher was still here. That was the last thing he did at the end of the year, was to get that civics thing approved. So we've spent $100,000 on civics books. Probably this would have taken effect this fiscal year, sometime in the summer. So could you please look into that? Because they told us it was the best thing that they'd ever seen, and so I'm curious why they need another $150,000 if this in fact is for civics or is directed there.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
it could be as small as asking for replacement materials for the materials that were already adopted. So while I said it, it doesn't mean a full-scale adoption. It may mean they need replacement materials, or there could be another course section running. I don't have the inventory with me, but it doesn't mean a full-scale, brand-new adoption.
I have one last question, if I may, Ms. Van Torver. Discovery education, we took it out of the budget last year. It was $70,000. When Ms. Hoensi and I, when we went on our tour of some of the schools, we asked, I forget exactly, was it Amherst Street, I think? They said that they liked that Discovery Education program. It was very helpful in the elementary schools, and that was about $70,000. Can that be put back on this list for future consideration?
I think the challenges with Discovery Ed is it's a large expense, and there's a low access rate for teachers. So while you may be hearing from some that are in favor of it, it wasn't utilized widely across the district. So for the price, I don't recall it, I want to say $70,000 to $90,000. Over 1,000 teachers, there were a couple hundred that used it. So it wasn't a huge utilized resource. We've identified thousands of free resources that we can use that are vetted for classroom use. Discovery does have free resources. Some of the videos that are contained in Discovery Ed are outdated. They're of poor quality. They date back to the 90s. The Magic School Bus, Bill Nye the Science Guy. So we found so many other resources that could increase student learning. We spent time during the February in-service day. John Forrest worked with teachers to identify an inventory of videos that they could use in lieu of Discovery Ed that are free and current. And lastly, in regards to Discovery Ed, it's not one of those resources that we believe are best educational practice that can increase student learning. It's certainly a good supplement and can be a visual for kids. But I would just encourage a degree of caution with that, because it was a large expenditure, not widely used, and we've already identified some more free, current, and appropriate resources for teachers to use.
Done?
I have another question, but I'll let other people speak.
Yeah, let me have one, okay? Dr. McKinney, if the budget comes through with the $254,000 as the number, you're still short $86K, right? So, and then you haven't put the science standards in there, or the other two, so it would be appreciated if you could, like Mr. Kaufman has says, is plan it out for the next 4 or 5 years, how you intend to expand the purchases. And I hope that you could be more specific about which books, that was a algebra book or a speech book or whatever, okay? Let the record show that Mrs. Oden arrived at 6:20. Do you have any questions at the beginning of this? You missed a little bit of it, so. No, we have power problems at home, too. Well, we thought we might lose it here, too. It went off a couple times. Are there any other, oops, I'm sorry, Ms. Johansson.
Thank you. I'm still concerned. You're saying the current fiscal 18 budget that we're in, we spent first column, the current year budget, that's 513,000. The next column, the projected, is fiscal year 19. That's the coming year plus other years, and that's anywhere from 254 to 380. It's about half of what we spent this year. So why was there such a significant cut if we're short textbooks? Because you're saying that 254,000 was in the budget. That's about half of 513,000 that you're saying that we spent in the current year.
So from what was left behind and from what was left of the textbook schedule and what was dedicated for going forward, the 254 could probably cover textbook adoptions for 3 departments at the high school, and that would be it. So there would be nothing for the middle school or anything for the elementary school. So like you're saying, going forward, the projected needs have to be addressed over multiple years and trying to balance out giving something to all the 3 levels over the course of every year.
I'm just wondering why it's so low. If we spent $500,000 this year on textbooks, how do we spend half that amount next year and call it adequate?
Well, I don't know if I would call them textbooks. Eureka is a consumable open source material. StudySync is an online platform. That 250 is a 5-year commitment, so that you don't see the cost continuing the year forward. So 5 years down the road, we're going to need to evaluate, do we want to have StudySync at the middle school going forward? iReady Instruction is our middle school intervention piece based on the iReady diagnostic. That's not a textbook. The same with Eureka consumables now moving into the middle schools, grades 6 through 8, along with new science materials for $80,000, not including the replacement of $10,000 for novels every year. And there was an adoption, I gave it at the last meeting, of the textbook adoption schedule for textbooks purchased this year. I want to say it was in math, but I don't have it listed here. I apologize.
Okay, I mean, if they're not textbooks, they're curriculum, supplies, materials, online, whatever. Unless we get more detail, it's hard to differentiate between those different categories. I'm just looking at the expenditures this year have gone down by half to next year. And teachers are telling us we're short, we've got old whatevers. Why did we cut this section of the budget so drastically?
Again, I'd have to go back to the budget sheet. But the other flip side of that is what I'm hearing from teachers is when you pay $100,000 for a set of textbooks that are going to become outdated in X number of years, and they only come at one reading level or one entry point for students. Some of the departments are asking, can we use a myriad of resources that meet the vast needs of kids as opposed to just a textbook? I understand that AP departments need specific materials, but also allocated through the curriculum budget are things like professional development, sending teachers to the AP institutes over the summer so they're prepared to teach those AP courses when they come back in the fall. We've sent curriculum folks at the middle school level to Eureka this fall, so they'll be ready for teaching grades 6 through 8. We've invested in next-gen science standards for the middle school as well.
I just don't see how, if we're not keeping up with what we spent last year, we're cutting it, however you call it, textbooks or materials. I'm just wondering if we're going to cover the ground that we're supposed to keep our students with supplies that help them.
That's the goal. So I'm getting closer, but again, it's hard to do something until we turn the corner to the budget's finalized and I can allocate funds and let people come together and do professional development. Promising everybody, you know, 100,000 going forward doesn't really do anything until the fact is what's available in the budget, what's the capacity, and what are the needs district-wide. And frankly, I wasn't here before I got here. The schedule wasn't followed. There were some things that were scheduled to be ordered that weren't, and other things that weren't scheduled that were ordered. So I'm trying to give you a projection of where we are now, where we're going, and I'm happy to come back and keep revisiting it and showing you what is being ordered for what courses and what content. The head teachers have been pretty honest. I met with all of them. Ms. Fitzpatrick was there. I went to 2 separate meetings and met with them directly. I have a list of their needs. My goal is to address the district-wide and not just certain pockets. And there's some that haven't had funding. I recognize that, and they were very honest with me. But in the end, there's only, like you all know, I don't have to tell you, there's only so much, resources, so many resources to go around.
Dr. McKinney, you mentioned the fact that some things were not bought, or you thought they were bought, or whatever, that didn't go through the way it was budgeted. It's another reason for doing a plan for 5 years so that you can see where things get switched around or get canceled or whatever. And the other thing is the $254 in the budget isn't the total amount of money for curriculum, is it?
No.
Okay, so what else is there?
Well, there are other lines in there that go for assessment, additional hours that fund all our steering committees and PD. I'd have to go back and go through the breakdown of all those, but it's, when you're spending $70,000 for iReady, that's a large chunk of money. Another $12,000 or $11,000 at the middle school. Those things add up.
Yep.
Probably, and we're down to only meeting with our steering committees 3 or 4 times, which is really a third of what it used to be. They used to meet monthly. So, while I like to give money to professional development and have the steering committees, I'm limited with the resources I can use to meet the needs for everyone. Paraprofessionals want some additional PD. I'm working on that piece. Guidance wants some pieces. So, frankly, it's all pieces of a puzzle. I was trying to portray that as what the challenge is here, because we do have some needs, and I do want to help everyone. I think we can get better together, but I also would like us to have the flexibility of not being locked into a schedule, and if something were to come from the state or they change something, that we can adapt and still have capacity in the budget to fit in things like literacy materials or other supplemental resources and not having to be locked in. So I guess I didn't do a good job presenting it, but in the end, it's about balancing the needs with the capacity of the budget and the limited resources we have available. And I understand the teacher frustration. So when you do large-scale implementation of programs at schools or levels, it does require a large budgetary requirement.
Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. First thing I wanted to ask about or make a comment about, I've drafted a policy that was submitted back last year in the September timeframe that spoke to not using textbooks, that we really intentionally over time make a conscious choice to move away from textbooks and take advantage of some of the materials that you spoke about that are online, that have been vetted for various grade levels, etc. So I think strategic, God forbid I use the word strategic plan, but the strategic plan should incorporate the idea of moving toward, if everything is online and we have the investment in the Chromebooks, a lot of that stuff could just be installed on the Chromebook and available, put on the Google Drives, or however, it's a local resource. So I think that's something I would recommend this committee make a concerted effort to look at. The other thing, as far as the budget goes, the good news is we don't have a budget. So please, if you can, for the 27th, please come to that meeting. The board is going to take some action on a budget. We may or may not approve it that night, but we will be in deliberations on the budget. So we've focused on the textbook line. And I realize now that that's an extremely limited viewpoint to have, given the fact the way you've tried to present it. When I saw this, I was thinking it was textbooks. And I didn't appreciate the fact, the iReady and the Eureka are consumables or whatever. But I'm curious what you want to say, and then I want to continue with my comment.
I will be here on the 27th. I would definitely advocate for the board not to cut anything from the curriculum area because the needs are there. So
okay,
that's can I finish with you?
Yeah, sure.
I guess the other piece with this that I would ask the board to understand is that I partner with other groups to do some of the things here. So for example, if we were going to grow in our capacity to use technology at the middle and high school, I need technologies department's help with access points, infrastructure, and I can't deploy the Chromebooks to those So that's kind of the progression. So again, that factors into this timeline. So I can't roll it out maybe next year, it could be a year after that. But in the meantime, you still have people waiting in the queue, hoping for more resources. So that's part of the information I've been collecting, and it's a ripple effect when you're going through your deliberations. If those access points or infrastructure are not going forward into the middle and high schools, that certainly limits the options that we have here. Going back to the departments at the high school, there's some groups that are willing to do a pilot with some online resources and use Chromebooks, but again, what would you call it? The integrity of the online or Wi-Fi all the time is a challenge for them. But we have partners out there that are willing to help us, because then you get multi-level passages, you get content that's more engaging, you don't have the page by page, we can do closed reading, we can differentiate. So it does give us more capacities, but it's all built on, obviously not the network, but the ability to get online and the Chromebooks and things like that. So I understand your frustration about this, but it's not just a singular issue. It kind of goes into a couple other venues.
So if I can respond as a board member who cares about our investment in the infrastructure, I mean, we approved in this budget over $100,000 on endpoints. We did. It's in there.
I don't know what an endpoint is, I'm sorry.
The way you connect to the network inside of a building. The year before that, we increased the bandwidth in and out of every school to gigabit speed. So it's actually 10 gigabit lines I think we put in. So we've been investing in infrastructure consistently as long as I've been on the board. I'm a big advocate for that. So if I were to hear from you at the budget meeting on the 27th, a detailed need analysis that could explain to me why I need $380,000 to spend in curriculum at large, maybe includes a little bit of infrastructure, it includes online textbooks, it includes this big package, the PD, everything you spoke about. I look at it and say, okay, this year we spent 513. They're asking for 380 this coming fiscal year in 2 weeks. I see a reduction, sort of Ms. Hohensy's point, why did we cut it in half? I'd be inclined to give you the 380 and ask you if it was enough, since we've already spent $500,000 this year, why aren't we maintaining that? I think it's more, we should be maintaining that 500K. I don't think it should be cut at all. I think that's one area of the budget that we have to maintain consistency and a focus on maintaining. I don't want to get into a budget discussion, but you may find you have way more support on the board to sustain 500,000 spending than even the 380, which is you think it's off the charts. I think you may find you might find support for more money as it relates to curriculum at large. I'm using your description as an at large. Thank you very much.
I would really like to suggest that we get a 5-year plan for purchasing of books. That old saying that if you don't have a roadmap, any road will take you wherever you want to go, I guess. And doesn't mean that you have to be held to it, but it just shows that you have an idea of what you need and when you need it, and I know that things change, people have different attitudes. I was going to ask you if there's some philosophy in the curriculum area regarding the type of books, whether you have that kind of encouragement to teachers, something that says, well, we think that you need to first look at electronic books, or hard copy books. That's going to be your philosophy, so that it's standard throughout the school district. Or maybe you have a different one for elementary, that they're always going to be a hard copy book. Or middle school, a little variation or two or something like that. I don't know whether you have that kind of a philosophy, but that I think would help in keeping an idea of where we're going. I personally feel that anything that's going to be done on a computer is going to be expensive no matter what. whether it's the hardware or the software or the resources that go along with it, they're just going to go up and up and up because it's a gold mine, to be honest with you. So, are there any other questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
there was a question at the head teacher meeting regarding policy of the specificity in the policy around curriculum materials. It doesn't have to be textbooks, can it be online materials? So they were asking for clarity around that. So Ms. Fitzpatrick was looking into that and getting back, because that certainly would play a piece in all of this.
Good. Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that. Ms. Hohense.
Thank you. I too am concerned that it's not enough of an investment in this area, but at the same time, I think there's different age groups, whereas an elementary school child might benefit from bringing home a hard copy so he can work with his parents in terms of accomplishing his homework, and then we don't have Wi-Fi at home. So like all of that needs to be figured in, and what is the cost of a textbook that lasts 3 to 5 to 8 years versus the software that you have to pay the software fees every year. So there's a lot of components that I'm sure that you're evaluating, and it's not a simple decision. And which medium do certain age kids learn better? Do they learn better to be able to have a book that they touch versus something that's on the internet? So there's a lot of components that I'm sure you're aware of that you'll figure into this, but we need, if you have more needs, more specific needs, I think this committee, or at least some of the board members, are interested in hearing those.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think part of how we ended up here was, should we, I guess the question around the curriculum management plan and the adoption, should we continue purchasing materials and getting the same results? So now that steering committees have been meeting and having been met in a year or two, they should be taking the lead in investing the curriculum that we're offering for kids, and are we getting the results that we want? And if not, should we be looking at other, not only resources, but also professional development, instructional strategies? Just replicating the same thing over and over again is just going to get you the same results. So I do think that's a part of it, and the steering committees play an important role in that going forward. So part of fitting into the curriculum budget is, can I increase them from meeting 3 times a year to maybe 5 times a year? That's one of the challenges going forward too.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Are we ready to move on to our second topic on the agenda? Summer reading follow-up. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I want to wait because I had a little bit different question. I know that we're using the SAT for all of our students. And I was reading the Department of Education had put out an 11-page notice. Are we doing everything that we should be doing to let our students know, especially those who are not taking it for college but are taking it because the district is using that as a benchmark? Are we letting them know that there are questions that are asked on the SAT that they do not need to answer due to the privacy? I'm very sensitive to all of the privacy issues associated with things like this, and they have some very specific questions that are asked by the SAT and ACT that infringe upon the privacy that students do not need to answer, especially those who are not going on and are using it for higher education. So I want to know if we're educating our students about that and protecting their privacy. Thank you.
Dr. McKinney, could you bring that back to the next meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next question is on, topic is a summer follow-up. I guess these are the questions that we had from last time?
Last time, I believe I shared information about the district's partnership with the Nashua Public Library and their summer reading programs, and there was questions about what was happening at the high school level. So this is 2 updates from the 2 different high schools in terms of what's happening at South and what's happening at North. So the 2 department heads sent over an update, and you could see that they are also working with them, They're working to have the kids going into high school read at least one title from the list, and then they're having a reading, what do they call it, a symposium or gathering at North. So that's just an update, FYI, for the board, based on your request from the last meeting.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Raymond.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that I was here the night of the freshman night here at North. I don't remember why I was here, but I was here for something, and
Forget and get lost?
I don't recall. I've lost it. But I wandered over to where they were actually handing out books. They had boxes and boxes of the summer reading books for the freshmen, and each student who came with to freshman night was able to pick a book off the list and actually bring that book home with them that night to read. And the head English teacher was telling me about like that they're going to have groups in the fall to discuss the books that were read over the summer. And I just thought that was really, I thought it was really neat, and I thought it was cool that we actually had the books available to students as opposed to just saying go find it somewhere.
Make it very difficult for them to refuse. I agree with that. Was that North?
Yes, it was here at North.
That could have been left over from when the former principal had a reading program. Those books, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Most of them were fairly new books. The ones that I saw were published within the last maybe 5 or 10 years. So.
I can't imagine not being able to read. Just can't imagine that. My life would be very dull if I didn't have a good book. I'm reading a good book right now. It's Rose something or other. It's all about camps in Nazi Germany. Not a very happy one, but it's very interesting. Okay, so any other questions on the follow-up? All right, so now we're on to your topic of review of the student performance. And that doesn't mean the play. Right?
I won't be singing and dancing, no. So we're just going to go backwards to go forward. So we talked about data last in October. So here's a summary of the steps that were outlined for next steps in October. And these are, most of them are either completed or continuing into next year in terms of following the PD plans for early release and in-service, reforming steering committees and meeting regularly. The next slide will give you an update on that. Data teams meeting, reviewing their data and making plans actionable, evaluating our curriculum, and learning and adapting to the new state accountability system or student assessment system. Here's an overview of the committee work that's been done in the 4 content areas. All of them met 2 or 3 times. Many of them haven't met in a number of years, so it was nice to bring the group back together again. ELA and math played a key role in developing some data collection going forward and accommodations for students. Next year, social studies will be dedicated one of the early release days. They're asking for additional resources in some areas. And science, their area of focus is, like we've been speaking about, next-gen science, the pilot at the middle school, alignment. There's a need for more resources, for example, some of the science kits. And some of them are also asking for, is there a way we could centralize storage as opposed to stockpiling these kits in the classroom and taking up space? So the district data team met twice this year. You can see the membership from pre-K to 12. Their first meeting, they worked to develop an assessment inventory. So what that does is tell you the list of assessments, what it evaluates, what grade levels, what kind of assessment is it, and how is it being utilized. So we have all of those compiled. They reviewed the data protocols from all the schools that were done this year, and they participated in putting together this presentation I'm sharing with you today. So we're going to go by level. So each of the elementary, middle, and high schools, and they kind of follow a similar format. So these are the assessments that are a part of that assessment inventory at the elementary level, and we'll kind of give an overview of those assessments going forward. So here's our early literacy assessment that we utilized this year in K and 1, which assesses letters, sounds, and blending, segmenting, rhyming. All kindergarten students were given this assessment along with new first grade students to the district. They are assessed until they meet the expectation as outlined by the rubric. And teachers use this for data-driven instruction in the classroom. So if students are having difficulty identifying letters and sounds, we keep working on those skills, and then we reassess and make sure they're meeting expectation. So some numbers to look at. You can see 78% of kindergarten students met expectations for the beginning of the year. 61% for first grade students met expectations for the beginning of the year. And then you have a breakdown for kindergarten for title and non-title, as well as first grade expectations for title and non-title, at least for the beginning of the year. This slide shows it based on trimester. So 66, we went up from 66% to 77% of students that met or exceeded expectations on this early literacy assessment.
Oops, I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Raymond.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm confused by that chart because the kindergarten one, it said 78.4 met at the beginning of the year, but the second trimester it had gone down to 66%. If you look the last slide to this slide.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas it looks like first graders improved significantly. It looks like they only had 61% of first graders were meeting expectations at the beginning, up to 77, which is good, but the kindergarten one strikes me as we've lost students along the way.
So
Am I reading that wrong?
I'm wondering if it's so 78% of all the students met the expectations for the beginning of the year.
Yep.
Of the students that didn't meet it, the next slide is the percentage of those students who didn't meet it. 66% of the kids that did not meet it, or did meet it and moved on, because you wouldn't keep assessing them once they've already met the standard. So I see what you're saying, the discrepancy in the numbers.
So did what you just say mean that this second number, the second trimester, are only those students, the 22% that didn't meet it at the beginning were assessed again? And of those 22 that didn't meet it, 66 now do?
To those that didn't meet it.
I believe so, but I'm going to double check.
Okay, because that makes more sense to me that we've taken that 22% and gotten more than half of them where they need to go. I like that better.
Were there third trimester results?
I didn't have an opportunity to run that report because grades are still kind of in the works and report cards, so I can bring that to a future meeting.
And once again, this is teacher observation assessment. No?
No, they have a specific
I thought
protocol.
that's what early literacy assessment was. No?
I could show you.
Well, just tell me, what do they did they watch a tube or
No.
how to?
They asked them, can they identify certain letters? Can they tell the sounds that the letters make? Can they put two letters together and make a sound, a blend?
So as the teacher observes this, it's not like,
Yeah, but they're given some proctored materials. It's not just kids in play or reading a book, or it is a structured assessment. I guess that's what I was trying to say.
yes.
Yep.
So this data is kept in a database somewhere?
Yep.
Okay.
So this is new this year. There's a dyslexia law that came through, so this is meaning that, and this would move into first grade next year, and next year we would have a kindergartner screening tool that we'd use in kindergarten.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, yes, Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you. So I think I had similar confusion as Ms. Raymond in looking at these things, and then you jump into discussing non-Title I schools, and there's no accompanying chart for the Title I and then the non-Title I schools. So for me, it would be helpful to understand, I would like to see grades K and 1 is fine, but the first, second, third trimester of Title I schools as well as non-Title I schools, so we can get a better understanding about what's going on. Because the narrative is, it throws it in there, but it really doesn't help isolate the data, nor does it reach any conclusion. Or one of the things when getting a briefing like this, I appreciate recommendations. You guys are closest to it, you understand it better than we do, so what do you want from us? So just,
It's coming, we just haven't got.
okay, I just want to be clear, so I'm looking for that, and I did go through this, but okay, so you understand my concern about that chart, thank you.
The next assessment is the Fontes and Pinnell Benchmark Assessment System, the BAS, which really observes and analyzes students' reading ability, reading comprehension, written comprehension, fluency, retell. This is a one-on-one, done on a one-on-one setting with a teacher and a student and a piece of text. The teachers go through, they analyze the errors that are made, they monitor the student for self-corrections, see if the student can write about their reading, and this data is utilized as one of our key data points at the elementary level to provide intervention for students, monitor and report progress, and determine placement for guided reading instruction and guided reading groups with a teacher or a Title I teacher or a reading specialist. So this chart here shows the percentage of students on or above grade level based on BAS instructional levels. So I believe we did that earlier. This fall we had an overview on the reading assessment. We had that chart that with the alphabet A to Z, and it had spans. So if you were to take those spans, this shows you this percentage of students that are on or above grade level, first trimester and second trimester. Like I said, I was not able to run reports for third trimester. I was trying to get all of this into Tara's hands for copying and distribution to the board.
Okay.
I'm going to take a committee first, and then I'll get you. Okay, Ms. Raymond.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Van Twyver. I'm curious about the differences between this and the early literacy assessment. I think I understand the Fontes and Pinnell because we had that presentation with the alphabets. I'm curious why the early literacy assessment is showing such a higher number of children in the earliest grades being at expectations, whereas Fontes and Pinnell is showing less than half in K and 1. Are they testing different things?
This is a more rigorous assessment because kids in kindergarten are looking to read a level D, a full text, at the end of the year. Yep. So the early literacy screening, that we start, just to give context, this is our second year with the BAS. That came on last year, but then this year the state initiated the dyslexia piece that you had to have something in place that screens all kindergarten and first grade students and lets parents and teachers know for areas of concern. So we had to put something in place because this assessment didn't meet all the criteria. But going back to your original question, the rigor of this is kids are reading, they're reading out loud, they have to comprehend, they have to be fluent, there's a timing piece, and then we're looking for them to read on level D, which is, a predictable book as opposed to just letters, sounds, blending, rhyming.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Porter?
And there's also a big comprehension piece to the Fontes and Pinnell that may not be in the other one.
Absolutely. The comprehension,
The
retail,
comprehension
beginning,
piece in
middle,
that
and
one
end.
is huge.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. So if I understood what you said, you said it quickly when you were, I just want to understand. So the students that are not at grade level, they are identified and receive remedial assistance? Is that the case for anybody who has a deficiency?
Are you talking the BAS or the,
In either the first
Yeah.
either the first segment that you described, or even here with literacy, which I can understand is a much broader topic, and you just addressed comprehension and the letters and things. I just want to understand for the young people that are not at grade level throughout the course of the year as they're measured, are they then eligible for, do they then receive, I'm going to call, you guys call it, I believe the district calls it intervention, right? So do those students in K through 5, in this instance, do they receive remedial intervention?
yes, but I just want to give a caveat to that. So all kids get the help they need. So, but if a student was supposed to be reading on level D, for example, and you're level C, your intervention would be that you come and work with me in a small group with 2 or 3 other kids, and that's targeted intervention. It looks different in different places. Other schools have the capacity for Title I support, reading specialists, special education, but part of what we do with this BAS and the early literacy screening is we differentiate and we give kids instruction based on their needs, as opposed to just one broad instructional overview for everybody that may work for a handful of the kids out of 20. The group you're in is specific to your reading level, your needs based on these assessments, and then we're monitoring your progress so that you move from a C to a D by the end. The expectation is all kids make a year's growth in a year's time.
I'm thrilled to hear that. So, but my next question is associated. Is there a distinction, a difference between Title I schools and non-Title I schools and non-Title I schools in the delivery of this intervention? If everybody gets what they need, that's absolutely what I would want to hear. But I'm curious, is there a difference in the way that's delivered between a Title I school and a non-Title I school?
Certainly, title schools have additional resources that the non-title may not have, and they definitely utilize every personnel that they can find, from a para to a reading specialist to a special educator. Working in a non-title school, you find all those things, and you maximize. It's really the teacher making it happen. So you don't always have that support, but the protocols for giving this assessment, following the assessment schedule, and using the results to target your instruction, that happens at all 12 schools.
Thank you. Ms. Porter. Oops, sorry.
The other thing about the benchmark is it says over here that you're finding an instructional level, so the big part of that is to match kids to their instructional level, means putting them in the right level of book so that they can make the progress. So you want to be matching kids to books, which is a big part of what this allows you to do. So your differentiated instruction would be that you're putting each kid in a reading level, a book where they belong, where they'll be able to have success and grow. And that's happening at every school.
Ms. Johansson and then Ms. Oden.
Looking at this chart, I see kindergarten and first grade, and in my mind, I think readiness. Not every child is ready. So 40%, 50%, that really, I'm not too worried. I'm delighted to see that second and third grade, they're picking up 60 to almost 70%. But I'm puzzled as to why in fourth and fifth grade, they dip back. Is it that they can't make the next step? Their reading skills in the second and third grade aren't solid enough? They need more repetition? I just don't understand why it goes in reverse in those 2 grades. That's what I'm trying to understand. So maybe you could help me.
Can you just share what you mean by going back? Where's the reversal?
I look at kindergarten and first grade, and I know there's such a thing as readiness. Some kids are not cognitively ready to learn as fast as others. So they don't make the same progress in those early years. Second and third grade, you're seeing a lot more, 60 to 68% on or above the grade level. So that's really showing improvement. More of them are ready. But I just don't understand how we go in fourth and fifth grade and we get that reversal. What are we not doing right? Where are we losing them? What's happening here? I can't get an explanation looking at this that makes sense to me.
I would say two things to that. One, the reading specialists and the two ELA curriculum specialists weren't thrilled about sharing some of this material because the teachers were told that this wouldn't be district data until the third year, because we're still learning. It's the second year. We don't necessarily have the consistency,
Right, the same
still learning.
approach.
Right. The other piece to just keep in mind too is when you're at a kindergarten level, you may be going from a pre-A to a D. There's only 4 levels you can go, whereas the span in the upper grades is larger. It's probably twice, 6, 7 levels. And it's different from learning to just read and become fluent to reading to learn and the content ramping up. And the comprehension challenges at the 4th and 5th grade level is much higher. So I do think while the numbers are what they are, I do think I'm hearing from teachers that they are learning how to give the assessment. They're finding more insight to their kids. They know how to use it for their guided reading instruction. And, you know, I'd like to see what the third semester brings in terms of kids approaching grade level. It's about getting kids matched with the instructional text, meeting them on their level, but it's an assessment. We also, kids want to enjoy reading, love reading, be doing it all the time. So I think it's a number of those factors in that chart.
Okay, so hopefully next year we'll see a progression in that 4th and 5th grade slot where they'll have the consistency of this new approach and we'll get better results.
May I?
Sure.
You know, when you talk about books, you talk about reading. We talked about the budget, wherever that sheet is. This is another challenge. You know, classroom libraries across the district, teachers want more and more books. You should have a broad range of books, not just in level, but in interests. And that's one of the challenges. And to address that, you know, you're talking $10,000 to $20,000 for chunks of that. So we've tried to address that at some schools, and we're looking at a hybrid model for that pilot in terms of online reading and reading, you know, text itself, print, because going forward, kids are going to have to be able to do both. But that is one of the areas that I continue to hear from teachers in terms of, you know, not having book rooms at the school level and then wanting more books in their classroom.
So is that 10 to 20,000 per building, per school, or the district-wide need?
Oh, that would be just like a book room at a school level. So if we were to pick a school like Lead Street, and that would just be
the
it.
library?
It would be a leveled book room for a classroom.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Leveled.
so it's not, it would be
Per
a
building.
substantial cost if it went down to the classroom level.
Okay.
Ms. Raymond, then Mr. Kaufman? Did I miss you,
Oh, I'm
Dottie?
sorry, I forgot.
Excuse me, Ms.
That's okay, go on.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say to Mr. Kaufman, in Title I schools, you have Title I teachers as interventionists. So they do get that extra support. But a Title I teacher, I believe, can only take 4 or 5 students at the most. They have a limit to how many students. So if you have a student right on the bubble, that student might have to wait until maybe they improve, or they have to wait until somebody moves out of the group that improves enough, scores high enough that they can then move out of the group. They don't need intervention at that point. But unfortunately, I think over the last 5 years, we have eliminated 8 Title I teachers who give direct instruction to students, and that's unfortunate.
Is that because the grants ran out and we weren't able to hire them as into our normal staff? When you say I mean, Title I is federal government money, largely for teacher salaries, if I'm not mistaken, in those schools. And they have a time limit with 2 or 3 years for them, where the government will pay for that position, at which point, if we don't fund it out of the district budget, then we lose that slot. Is that right?
No, it's not quite like that, but my understanding is the amount of money we get from the government in Title I has been reduced, and we are spending, I believe, out of Title I, are we spending money for coaches and some of the curriculum people? Is some of that coming out of there?
That's Title II.
And some of the assistant principals, that are working part-time with curriculum, isn't there money coming out of Title I?
No, Title II.
Is that new? Because it used to come out of Title I. No?
It was there when I got here. I can't
Okay,
speak to that.
okay, thank you.
Money.
My question has to do with, Ms. Hohensee used readiness, and I think that was in the context of very young students ready to get into more academically oriented, heavy-duty academics. I'm curious about the students that will go from 5th grade to 6th grade. Because right now, we don't have any kind of a district-wide even policy that addresses what constitutes promotion from the elementary, I'm using the word promotion, advancement from the elementary school into the middle school. As I understand it, we have no established criteria on a district-wide basis that says, okay, we know you're ready to succeed in middle school because you took this test and you did well, and so we have confidence that when all this new stuff we're going to give you, you're going to be prepared. So I'm curious what the district administration, what their opinion is, and maybe you have to find out and have conversations, and that's fine. But what do you think about the idea of a district-wide protocol, if I could call it that says our 5th grade students, we know they're prepped and ready to go into 6th grade because of X, A through Z, where right now, if you go back 1 second to the previous slide, right now, let's say that 65 even goes to 75 in the 3rd trimester, or even 80%. There's still potentially 20% of the kids that may not, in fact, be ready because they're not at grade level. So what do we do for those 20%? And if we can identify them then can they get extra remedial help, or can, in other words, I want to keep the gap to a minimum, leaving elementary school into middle school, because I'm concerned that the gap only gets bigger, which kind of goes back to I'll use the word philosophy that the board has come to describe as, we want everybody to read by the end of 3rd grade. We want the kids caught up for 3rd grade, because that's the grade that predicts future success, if that's acceptable for me to say that. So here I am at 5th grade students, concerned about a group that may be deficient. We know who they are, yet right now we're just going to move them on to the middle school. Can we do something? Is there a grade 5.5 that just says, you're really close, you've got to finish this stuff, and then we're going to just get you over there? I'm just throwing out an idea, because it disturbs me that even if it's an 80%, which is a good number, but there's still 20 that represents a lot of work to do. So maybe you can come back to the board, either through this committee or some other mechanism. I'd be curious. I once had a conversation with, Sherry Fulton, and she described, and actually Gary Hoffman of associated with the Teachers Union, where they have like grade 3.5, where there is actually at that intervention time point, structured programs that really look at identifying and helping the kids that would otherwise, be pushed too far too fast. So I'd be curious with recommendations that you might have. Thank you.
Sounds to me like it's trying to not push people ahead when they're not ready for it, which never went over 3rd grade, so 6th grade, I don't know. 5th grade, I don't know. Ms. Raymond?
Thank you, Ms. Van Tuyver. I just wanted to know if we have multiple year data yet, so we can see about summer learning loss, or is that too premature? Because I'm looking at these where you have, the 2nd trimester of 3rd is 68%, and the 1st trimester of 4th is 59%, but that's the same, it's not the same students, it's everybody in 1 year snapshot, right? So I'm wondering if we have do we have 2 years worth of data or just 1 year where we could see what we have for summer learning loss and whether or not, our new summer program helps with that? And also just looking at, access to books, because I know a lot of kids who don't have books at home. I think the last stat I read from on the national level, it was like there was kids who receive free and reduced lunch. There's like an average of 1 book for 300 kids, whereas if a family made over $75,000, it's like 13 books per household or something. So I'm just curious. I don't think that's necessarily reflective of Nashua, but I'm just curious if we have any stats on, what the difference is between the end of 3rd grade and the beginning of 4th grade, and if we have any differences in.
So we'll have some data this going into the fall from Power Scholars, and then a year from now, we'd have more data for at the district level.
Anybody else have any questions on? Moving right along then.
The next slide gives an overview of the access scores for our ELL students in listening, speaking, reading, writing, and a composite score. You can see our scores have increased just a little bit in those areas at the elementary level, thanks to the tireless work of the ELL staff. But I'll be giving a breakdown at the other 2 levels for middle school and high school as well.
I find it interesting that it's speaking where it dropped. Am I looking at that right? Okay. Speaking in May of 15th of 16 was pretty high, around 1,200. Then it drops down to 800. Because I always think of English for the language learner, speaking is more important. Or am I wrong? I just find that kind of interesting. All the others go up, but.
And just important to note, I think it was the year 17 was the year it went from computer. So the blue would be without computer, and then the next 2 years are on the computerized assessment. And that's, I think, when the scores overall throughout the district declined due to the change in the format of the testing. And that was what Mr. Chopa had spoken about before.
Yeah, but that's only, it's only in speaking that it went down.
Our next slides, we go to iReady for math and reading. Yes?
One moment.
Quick question, how many, we have what, about 1,000, 1,200? How many kids were tested in these years?
No, I'd have to go back and check. That sounds about accurate, but I'd have to go back to be sure.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes, Ms. Raymond.
Quick one. I see the scores go from 0 to 1,800. Is there a cutoff for English language proficiency where they don't need the intervention anymore?
Yes.
Where is that on the chart?
I would have to bring that back to you.
Okay.
I wish I could make a little line there to show you. Yeah, I can bring that back. The all set? So iReady Math, I think we're all familiar with that. Measures proficiency and growth. Our kids in grades 1 to 5 take it 3 times a year. This chart here shows the growth of students placing on level or higher from the fall to the winter diagnostic in reading. So green is fall, blue is winter. So you can see the gains our kids have made there. This is the percentage of students reaching proficiency on mid-level or higher on the winter diagnostic. So when they take it in, it's usually like January, February-ish. So you can see, I apologize for the typo there. Blue is fall, and it's supposed to be gray is winter. But you can see the gains the students have made in grades 1 through 5. This next slide is a new chart from iReady. I spoke to them on the phone on Friday. This shows the percentage of students that were in Tier 3, so greater than 1 level below grade level, and the gains they made to come out of kind of a Tier 3 intervention level down into an area closer to being on grade level. So you can see the gains that the kids have made coming out of there. So again, gray is fall and blue would be the winter.
I have a question. The numbers at the bottom are the number of questions? No, it couldn't be that.
Number of students.
Number of students.
Yes, ma'am.
But you don't show the grade that makes them proficient. We got ghosts in here? Right? There's nothing that shows you what the score is that makes them proficient or passing or whatever.
Oh, the exact number for proficiency? No, it does not, but
So, question, if I may.
Yes.
So the numbers 1 through 5 along the bottom, those are the grade levels, correct? So based upon this particular chart, the previous chart, not the one, so what we're saying, through the I-ready testing, roughly 20, at least for the 5th grade, just pick the one on the farthest to the right, 26% of our kids in the 5th grade have reached proficiency, and that was the February test or whenever that was, whatever test this particular was, right? The blue was the fall and the gray was the winter, and there'd still be a third one at the end of the year. So, and when was that testing done, and when will that be available?
so testing for that, I just finished the last week, and when I spoke to them on the phone, they need another week to get back to us with the presentation. So I'd have those.
Okay, so if
No
maybe you
weeks
can
times.
update us for the whole year, this academic year. But the thing here is, then the thing that disturbs me is it's still a 26% proficiency. So if I'm subtracting that from 100, we're looking at my math is 64, no, 54%. I'm sorry. I'm dead. I'm brain dead. 74% of our students are not proficient. 26% of our students are proficient. If I'm looking at the far right, just that one example of 5th grade, which pretty much is representative of the chart. So
So-
26 are proficient and 74 are not.
Isn't that the
Are not
national
placing on level or higher during the winter benchmark. So they still have 5 months of schooling to go, and then they would be tested again in June.
Okay, but
So, I'm
Isn't
sorry.
the gray, the national? It says on the winter diagnostics.
The national
7
comparison.
With national comparison, so the gray is national?
Yes, you're right.
So for grade 5,
Oh.
only 23% were proficient
Proficient or higher,
or high.
3% less than national comparison.
And
So that means 77
7.
are not proficient.
is this,
Well, if I did my
For
math,
winter.
my head math.
yeah, I think you're right. Is this for end of year standards?
Yes.
Not for, so they took this in, I don't know, December or January, but the test is on what they should know by June, right? So we wouldn't necessarily expect them all to have June skills
Okay.
in December or January, right?
Yeah, that
it's all
could have been
useless.
labeled better, I think.
That makes me
But it's
feel
not.
better.
So I'm really confused about this. I was confused going into this chart. It's worse for me now. So the gray is the national comparison, but you're saying that's that's the end of year? Or is it in fact the winter test?
No, the test itself, like if you got 100, if a student scored proficient on the test, they would meet the end of the year expectations,
Okay.
right?
But then this had to be compared to last year, end of year.
No, I think they're comparing where they are in December to where they need to be in June. Or am I getting that confused?
You can't get an average if it hasn't arrived yet.
Well, right.
A lot of the
So this has
questions,
to, the 26% on 5 has got to be for last year, last fall, last spring, right? End of year.
No, I think it's saying 26, or let's look at this one, the fifth grade. I think they're saying 23% of our fifth graders let's say they took tests in December, or have met the end of the year standards already. And the other 77% are still working on it. Or am I being overly optimistic about this?
If it says a national comparison, I assume that it's a group of kids who've taken this test, and that is the national number.
I don't
Which had to be, which, if you're comparing it to a national number, it would have had to be in the previous year. Yes, Ms. Porter?
So when you take the iReady math test, the questions on there, are there going to be questions on everything from the whole year? So if I take the test in December and there are questions from later in the year that I haven't done yet, I'm not going to be able to answer
But
those.
iReady is an adaptive test.
It is adaptive, but so it's going to still have questions from all of the strands. So there's still going to be geometry and measurement. There's going to be numbers and operations. There's going to be all of those strands which may not have been covered. So that it's going to adapt within that strand, but it's still going to say that I don't know the geometry questions on a fifth grade level yet because I haven't done that yet.
Well, I kind of question the term national comparison then.
It might, I've never seen the national comparison before, but it might be just giving that how many, how overall, how many kids are doing well in December on that full year curriculum. I don't know.
Test is given same set of questions, potential set of questions are given at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. So you have the same potential. So, right?
Well, and
So that's what you're comparing this kid against. You're saying, right now, only 23 of these percents know everything they're supposed to know by the end of the year. Is that what it's
I
supposed?
think, I haven't seen this chart before. Is that what it's?
So if we can just look at the chart from iReady itself. This
Yeah.
is winter performance, a
Is that
national.
in our packet?
This is the one I cut the slide from. This is the entire thing. The national comparison, which shows our district winter performance by grade in blue against the national average winter performance. So this was the one that was asked. Our kids are performing 3% difference to the national comparison just for the winter assessment.
Just the winter. So it's not the end of the year national comparison. So
But
there's something crazy here because the national people, they compile all the kids that took the test in the winter, and that would be the national total, like number one, grade one in there. At winter time, all the students in the United States took the test, and 24% became on grade. But here, our group only did 22%. Now, is that what you're trying to tell me, that it okay, so then that is not the end of the year, the 24%. The one that's in gray is, so you're not comparing apples to oranges. You're not saying that this child only knows 22% of what they should know, or 22% of the kids know what they should know by the end of the year.
Yes.
Is that right?
That one, 22% of our kids in December or whenever knew what they should have known, what they should know in June. So 22% of our kids were like, fantastic.
Right. So, but the 24% there is 24% of the national kids know what they should by the end of the year, what they should know by the end of the year. That 24% doesn't apply to the total amount of. You see what I'm saying? I think I understand it now.
So this is so confusing.
Yep.
So as confusing as it has been, so our blue number reflects kids that are really doing very well
Yes.
against the national number, if I can say it that way, right?
Yes, the
Can
number
we?
of national kids.
Right, no, but these kids in December are meeting a measured standard that we hope they would meet in June. So these kids are knocking it out of the park.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so my question relates to what are we doing for the kids in blue to ensure that they keep accelerating and stay ahead and are learning at a pace that they can absorb.
Good
I
question.
mean, we focus a lot on remediation. 70% of the kids who are not here are going to need some extra help, probably, or maybe half of them. But I'm concerned that we have kids that are accelerating. What are we doing to make sure they're still interested in school? Because this is where they get bored, right? And they start roaming, and the heads start bobbing, and they start falling asleep or making trouble because they're bored. So I've seen that happen. So, what can you address? What are we doing for that group of students that are doing very well, that are on track? How do we keep them engaged?
Oh, the 22%, keep them engaged.
right.
Okay, gotcha. Yes, Ms. Porter?
Now, can we get an answer?
Oops, I'm
Well, I
sorry.
was going to try to answer.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Okay. The Eureka Math program is really comprehensive, and it's easy to differentiate with that. There's a lot of materials, there's a lot of ways to extend, so you don't necessarily want the kids to go ahead, you want them to go deeper. So Eureka is very comprehensive, so there are ways to take those kids and say we're in 5th grade and you're learning a 5th grade math skill. Instead of jumping ahead to 6th grade, which maybe you would think you should do, you can go deeper into that 5th grade skill, which is only going to help them as they go. So it's not like you need to race them ahead and put them in 8th grade math or anything. So I really like the Eureka program, and it gives the teacher that flexibility to go deeper on the same skill that everybody's working on. Would you agree with that, Mr. McKinney? Okay, Dr.
But
McKinney,
if
sorry.
that's true for, I'm happy to hear that, that's true for math. What about literacy or reading, right? Because iReady we just use for math, right?
The same thing will happen in the language arts programs, the way that we're doing reading workshop, writing workshop, the Lucy Hawkins programs, you can do the same thing. You'll be able to go, instead of going ahead, you just go deeper on the skills that we have.
Thank you. Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Ms. Oden?
Can I ask Dr. McKinney, I know we have one of our assistant principals as a curriculum specialist who is working on advanced math. What does that provide classroom teachers with?
So Tracy Cassidy, the AP at Dr. Crisp, is also the part-time accelerated learning specialist. So if parents and teachers feel like their students or child would benefit from accelerating through the curriculum and skipping a year's instruction, they've developed a protocol for eligibility and assessment and then notification for parents. And it's not just about that, it's also about Ms. Cassidy also meeting with teachers and helping them differentiate and extend learning.
Okay, so we on to reading, or did we do that? iReady reading?
Yep, so iReady reading, same as iReady math, but assesses phonics, phonological awareness, high-frequency words, vocab, and comprehension. Here's a percentage of students reaching proficiency mid-on-level placement or higher on the fall and the winter diagnostic. So green is fall, blue is winter. Oops, sorry. Here's that chart again. One of the disadvantages of cutting and pasting here, I apologize. Percentage of students reaching proficiency mid-level or higher on the winter diagnostic and with a national comparison. So blue is our district, gray would be the national comparison.
That first one that I have on reading, there's huge jumps. Like first grade went from 6% to 22%? Or is that once again, it says fall and winter, so I assume.
Yep, green in the fall, blue in the winter. Yep.
Those are huge jumps. 18 to 34?
What we really want to see is what it's now in June. How much did they retain?
All right, we won't belabor this, we'll wait until we get the final.
Thank you. So again, I guess I'm still not understanding what the difference is between what this assesses versus what the BAS assesses, because on so on BAS, if you look at first grade, we had 43% and then 52% in first grade. And here, they're telling us we had 6 and 22, roughly about the same time of the year. So I guess my question is, why do our kids appear to be doing so much better on the BAS, which they did, not as well as they did on the first one, and now they look like they're not like doing worse on this one? Is there an issue with them, the medium, that it's the computer? Is it assessing a different skills? I don't understand.
I guess the easiest way to do it, and I could print out a sheet, if I were to give you a list of the standards at a first grade level and say you're going to take a test on all the standards, it would be 2 to 3 pages. Okay. That would be iReady.
Okay. So again, I'm forgetting that this is end of the year. I think that's my problem.
BAS is just looking at your reading skills, how well you read fluently, your comprehension, can you write about your reading, can you decode, can you monitor for self-corrections, can you repair comprehension, can you retell beginning, middle, and end, all of those pieces.
Okay, thank you. I feel better.
Mr. Coffin?
One thing I would find helpful is a year-over-year comparison. And I understand the BAS is only in year 2 of until 3 years, which gives you the full data set, if you would. But I think if you're showing us data at the different testing points in a year, right, you have the fall, the winter, and what will hopefully be a third data point would be the end of year, June, where we are now, that we would have that data for at least the preceding 2 years through the BAS assessment process, right? And then you have all these other ones that you're using. Can you prepare for us, year-over-year comparisons? Because it's great to show that these kids have done so well this year, but I'm concerned, I guess I want to see how they did last year as well. I'm not sure that maybe these charts do that, but the kids who were in 4th grade are now 5th grade, but they're being measured against a 5th year, grade 5 rather, standard. So we don't know how they did last year, and then it might just be maturity. The kids are just, getting into it, and they're figuring out, they become part of the education process. So could you also give us the year-over-year for each of these? You have 3 data points a year. Right now, you'll have 2 years of data, right? At the conclusion of this semester.
BAS you're talking about? Yep.
So, and then everything should be compared to the previous couple of years.
Could we just come back to that point in a couple of slides?
Okay.
Ms. Van Twyver, I just had another thought. I'm sorry to take up your meeting. I'm curious to see how it changes for next year with the first grade, because these numbers, especially on the national level, where we only have 22% of our first graders who are reaching, the end of year standards, versus 33% nationally. We didn't have kindergarten last year, so these kids, quite a number of them either had half-day kindergarten, no kindergarten. Lots of kids come into first grade with nothing. So I'm curious to see how our kindergarten all day may or may not change the number for next year. So that's all.
So where were we?
We're actually on reading. I think you've got a
Did I go backwards?
mathematics up there. Oh. Maybe yours are ordered differently? Because mine goes from iReady reading to iReady next steps.
Math was previous for us, prior to the iReady reading.
Yeah, I think this one's mistitled.
Yeah.
This is your reading slide. Sorry about that. So the percentage of students in Tier 3 that were greater than one level below, and how they performed on the fall and the winter diagnostic. So on this slide, you do want to see the numbers coming down, because we don't want kids in that range where they're going to need ongoing interventions. So iReady Next Steps, we'll continue using iReady in grades 1 through 8. We continue to use the iReady data and reports to make instructional decisions and differentiate. In talking to curriculum associates, we need to determine if standards mastery assessments will provide additional insights for teachers. So that was a piece that we talked about before. If I wanted to assess a certain standard, I could assign kids an assessment within iReady that would be about 10 questions to see if they mastered that one particular standard. You could do up to 3 of them, but obviously you're talking 28, 30 questions, and it would be a longer assessment. So, and we're scheduling some professional development in iReady. They're changing their growth model across their platform next year. We're going to do some professional development for teachers and administrators, and then also work on that standards mastery plan.
Before we go on, may I ask you a question? I understand that you and Miss Fitzpatrick attended something with iReady. One night you were not here at our meeting. Can you describe what went on?
Yes, we went to the New England iReady User Summit. It was all the New England states. It was 2 days of professional development from iReady, meeting with other schools and districts that use iReady. They had local, state, and national presenters there. It was very good. So some of those presenters that were there will be coming to the district either on the November in-service day or the February in-service day.
Can you tell me how many schools were represented?
I'd have to get back to you, ma'am. I don't know the number, but I mean, I
A
saw
big crowd or a small crowd, or?
It's pretty big. I went to presentations from schools from Rhode Island, Springfield. There were people there from New York, New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Big
So-
area. Okay. Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. I have a question about, and I know the superintendent yourself have talked about, we'd like to see growth over the course of a year, 1 year's growth within an academic year. My concern is, and that's obviously very individual based upon the abilities of that particular student in whatever subject areas, it's very deep in every area of the child's education. My concern is that growth is one thing, and that's per student, individual accomplishment, if you will. But the outside world looks at the term proficient, and it's measured by a curriculum-based standard that's many facets to achieving a competency in a particular thing. So when you look at that national data, and you were using the word proficiency there, right? Are the students proficient at this time of year compared to what it'll be at the end of the year? But proficiency is one thing. That kind of goes to standardized tests. How are we doing against, what's our district's proficiency against that national test, if you will? And that's what gets published everywhere. That's the gap. That's the 23%. They're proficient, and then the remaining 77 are not. But yet we'll come as a district and we'll talk about the year-over-year growth of the students. So for me, they're apples and oranges, and they sometimes get interchanged and one highlighted more than another. But I think we need to be consistent, and if we're going to use both, we should always report both. And we should always compare both current year, different points of assessment, as well as prior years. But we haven't seen that. So going forward, when you do these kinds of presentations, can you address both the proficiency piece and the growth piece? And my concern is, home values are tied to proficiency, not growth. And a statement that we're in the bottom third holds true when you look at these numbers for proficiency, but it doesn't give the individual student credit for their particular growth. I think we should do both, but proficiency needs to be addressed and understood, because that's how the outside world, that's what the the educational complex, that's how it measures itself, is by proficiency. So we have to do that also. We can't just talk growth. And Ms. Van Twyver, I'm going to just point out that we're about halfway through this packet. Did you want to continue?
Told you no, don't do that.
I'm not going to ask for a motion or anything, but I am just
Thank you
going to
very
ask you a
much.
question.
I usually keep my meetings to 2 hours. I've always been able to, when policy, to be able to keep it within 2 hours. So I was not going to push that issue. But if you feel that you don't want to stay after 8 o'clock, then I'd like you to make it known now, or whether you want to continue with this. We are not all the way through it, and it is an important subject, so. How do you feel? Yes?
I guess my question would be to Dr. McKinney, I know we're asking a lot of questions, and I apologize, but given that, do you think you could finish it up by like 8:30 or 9, or do you think this will be a late night?
Not 9, 8:30 maybe, bud. Could you do it, could you finish up by 8:30?
Yes, ma'am.
Otherwise, we can continue this next month. We had professional development that is scheduled for that. I mean, I'd hate to leave our momentum here. I mean, we've been waiting for, I have been waiting for this all year long, so,
Ms. Van Twyver,
yes.
the point is, too, we don't have the end-of-year data, which would be helpful for this conversation. And a lot of what we talked about would be very different if we had the end-of-year data, because everything we know about end-of-year hasn't occurred. So when we look at 3 data points, we could see the progress over the year. Right now, we're left hanging, not knowing where the 23, is it 50, is it 80? What level of what number of percentage of our students have achieved the end-of-year expectation? So I don't know if the remaining conversation has those open-ended questions about the 3rd data point. Maybe you skip those, knowing you're going to come back to them another time.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
I'd appreciate the opportunity to complete the presentation. I came prepared tonight. I don't know my availability in July. I would like to take some vacation with my family, so I'm happy to go through the presentation, take your questions, and come back at a later date.
Okay. So is that okay with everybody? You willing to sit for another half hour? 45. Or 45 minutes,
So
I
are
guess.
you
okay.
saying until 8:30?
Yeah.
Yes, I think 8:30 should be adequate.
Okay.
So,
No, I agree. I think this is interesting. I think our conversation has been helpful. I'm perfectly willing to stay.
Ms. Hensey? Ms. Oden?
I'm not on your committee, so go right ahead.
Well, I mean,
No.
don't want to hold you up either. Mr. Coughlin?
Right ahead, if I have to leave, I will.
Okay. So continue, sir.
So this next part for elementary and middle speaks to the new state assessment system. This is new this year. Remember, we're no longer part of the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium. We have an assessment that's unique to New Hampshire. So this is for students in grades 3 to 5 in ELA and math. We haven't received our science scores yet. They're going through a standard setting process. I'll be attending some PD in late July, so I'll have more information for the board later this summer. Here are preliminary results that show student achievement in ELA and math by achievement level. The same 4 levels that were there before in SBAC are also here in grade 3. In grade 4, you can see our results. When you look at this cohort of students that were in 3rd grade, moving into 4th grade, I double-checked some of the numbers in here, so I apologize if your numbers are different than what's in here. I ran some different reports. But level performance for our students at level 3 or above, so we're at 47% in ELA for 2 years in a row, and an increase of 2% in math of students at level 3 or above. In looking at our 5th grade results, this would have been last year's 4th grade taking the SBAC.
Is proficiency level 3 and above?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Again, we have consistent performance in math of students at level 3 or above at staying at the same point for 44% the last 2 years for that group. So this slide summarizes steps for elementary, excuse me. So we're moving forward with the kindergarten screening tool. We're having a summer kindergarten institute for the second time this summer. We'll be going over the screening tool, sharing that with teachers. We'll be having some professional development as well. We'll continue utilizing the early literacy assessment in first grade, utilize the BAS. To the point that was mentioned before, looking at these results in isolation, we try to triangulate the data, which is best practice. So we utilize the iReady and the BAS and some of the other reading assessments to validate instructional groupings and student growth. We have some assessment calendars put together for data collection in writing, ELA, and math. And what we're trying to get to is a balanced assessment. So we're not relying on a singular data point. We're using some formative, benchmark, interim, and summative data. So those assessments that were put together for those calendars for ELA and math utilize a variety of assessments. For example, the writing collection is utilizing end-of-unit prompts in Lucy on informational, narrative, and opinion persuasive writing. The ELA calendar includes BAS, iReady, SAS, writing, and Study Sync has some built-in extended writing opportunities for students at the middle school. And then the math assessment calendar utilizes Eureka, iReady, SAS, and we're also going to be adding a piece for K2 fact fluency because we need our students to be efficient with their fact fluency going into third grade. One of the other expenditures for next year is teacherese for standards-based grading, assessment, and analysis. So on that list of expenses, that will be something that would be coming to the curriculum committee in August, September to speak to you about that and give an update. And we'll also be working to update grade 5 science and curriculum and content for Next Gen Science because that's one of the grades that get assessed with the new state assessment system, which is quite new to our 5th graders. Okay to keep on moving?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I didn't see a hand.
So here's an overview of the middle school assessments. Here's a percentage of students. We've seen the same chart from fall to winter and the growth they've made and being on level or higher. A similar chart for math against the national comparison. A percentage of students coming out of Tier 3 that were greater than a level below from the fall and the winter diagnostics. And switching over to reading, similar charts, green in the fall, blue in the winter. Percentage of students against the on proficiency on level or higher against the national comparison. And again, the same chart of kids coming out of Tier 3 in the fall and the winter diagnostics.
It's interesting that grade 8 has surpassed the national. Yay, that's what I say too, yay.
Louder.
8th grade.
Louder.
Yeah, with the microphone on, yay.
Yeah. One moment, we've got a couple of questions here.
So
Mr. Kaufman, then Mr.
I'm looking at these charts, and what's missing is a scale on the left side, right? So if this scale were 1 to 100, 29 and 30, visually, you'd see it in the bottom 30%. So could you put this in a scale?
But
The next-
again, this is measuring for end of the year, and this is in December.
I understand, but it's still a 1 to 100 scale. Proficiency is, this is a 1 to 100 scale, correct? So should not the bar charts be proportional to the scale? So you're looking at this, oh, it's such a tall bar, but it's only 29 or 30%. It's not in, I just don't get, I think it misrepresents the data in terms of what its proportion is to the scale, which is missing on every one of these charts. So I would ask that you add that. please, the next time.
You done?
Yeah.
Ms. O'Hency?
I'll pass right now.
Passing.
Pass right now.
Okay, Dr. McKinney, continue.
So these are preliminary results for grade 6 ELA and math.
Woo. 9% in math, wow, not good.
That's proficiency, that's the highest proficiency, though. So that's why it's 3 and 4, which is proficiency and above. So you can actually group the 16 and the 9, and so we have 25% of the kids that are at or above.
It's still not very good,
Yes.
Trying to
no
make,
matter how you add it.
trying to make some lemonade here.
Yeah, well. Okay, any questions? Okay, let's move on.
I mean, how do these things improve? I mean, as all the money, all the effort, all the great teaching, everything we do, and yet 25% of our kids in grade 6 are proficient in levels 3 and 4. So 75% are not. So it's not end of year. So, right, this is a snapshot of those two tests, is that correct? But we also know, historically, these numbers we've been living with for a long time.
Yeah.
So I want to know what we're going to do. The parents want to know. Kids don't know that they don't know. We know that they don't know. And it's our responsibility to make sure that, quite frankly, they do know the math. So I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying we don't have people working hard on this, but these numbers should be flipped, right? 75% of our students should be at proficiencies 3 and 4, not 25%. And this is, I need to know, I want to know more about what's going to be done. And I'd like to have some kind of a specific plan that really addresses this. And, oh, we introduced Eureka Math, and we've done this, and we've changed our testing. It seems like everything that goes on for 2 or 3 years and then it changes can't be compared to what you did before because it's so different, yet the percentages still remain roughly, split 2/3, 1/3, or in this case, a quarter. So, help me understand all the things that you're asking us to do are really going to make a difference. Because just keep looking at this year after year after year, it's very frustrating. And I'm sure it's frustrating on the part of the teachers too, because they know what they're doing to improve it. There's a hand over here.
I have the same frustration. I've been on this board for 6 years, and I haven't seen a lot of improvement. I keep hoping, though. Yes, Ms. Hoyensi.
Ask a question is, how long have we been using iReady? What did we use before? Can we see an outline of however long, if we've been on it for 6 years?
No, we haven't
What-
been on iReady for 6.
How many years have we been on it?
Probably, maybe 4. Let's see, came in when Jen Susing was assistant. So,
If we could see the progression that we've had with iReady, the whole thing, and then what did we use before? Were we doing better before? Is it the new curriculum that we're using? I mean, I just want to take a step back and look at the tools we've got, the tools we had. Where did we get our proficiency? Are we always on a downward spiral, or did we do better prior to this curriculum using iReady?
before that, we had.
I think it would be-
Kneecap. Well, kneecap. Getting too old for acronyms. And we didn't have iReady, and I don't know if they had another assessment that we didn't know about, that wasn't relayed to us, that I remember. But, Ms. Porter, do you know?
I do. Before iReady, we used to give the end-of-the-year test that went with everyday math and the end-of-the-year test that went with Scott Forsman.
Oh, okay.
So those were paper and pencil tests that we used to give. And then when we switched to this, we stopped giving those necessarily and went to iReady. So there always have been end-of-the-year tests.
Well, I don't think, yeah, we didn't doubt that, it's just that.
Oh, no, yeah, but that's what they were the ones that
Must
went,
have been.
yeah.
So what was our proficiency rate under those two?
Well, I
end of
have
the
no
year?
idea. I don't know.
I'm just wondering if we could look at some of that old data to see whether this new program is improving us, our students, or whether the old one gave us better proficiency.
I think we started to go down when we took the Smarter Balanced. I think that was, because they alerted us the fact that, you know, hey, this is a new test, so don't expect great wonders. And then it just started dropping from there. I believe that's right, but.
If we could complete the middle school section, I think it might be helpful in answering some of the questions before.
Okay.
So grade 6, there is a decline in the students at 3 and above, and both in ELA and math. Please recognize this is a new test. It's the first year teachers and students have been exposed to it in the first year it's been rolled out by the state. But in ELA in grades 7, we have level performance in ELA, 45% of the students in level 3 and above. And we did have a decline in students at level 3 and above in mathematics. Also a change in level 3 and above in ELA, going from 52 last year to 48, 39 to 26 in math. All of this is based on, which I haven't seen yet, the comparison of SBAC to SAS. Are we still comparing the same thing? They say yes. I haven't gotten more information. I'm hoping to get more this summer. So there is a challenge when you change the test and you change some of the pieces you're looking at. You may not be looking at the same assessment data. The next slide is a piece, just like we did for the elementary, shows the middle school scores on the access tests for listening, speaking, reading, writing, and the overall composite score. So here is some of the recommendations for the middle school. Following the ELA and math calendars that were developed by the steering committees, develop more higher depth of knowledge questions and assessment and performance tasks, so items that are more rigorous that align to the state assessment. The testing window for the SAS, they gave schools the option of picking or assigning your time, and it runs from March and June. The middle school is asking to push the window and take the assessments later, so that way you cover more of the curriculum and the content, and then you're testing later. It just makes for a challenging time in June, because that's typically when we give iReady and all the end of the year events, so we're going to do some planning around that. We need to develop some more common assessments and performance tasks, continue to support our ELL and special education students. The only piece that's out there for the new science assessment are these interim assessments that are online, so we're going to use some of those to prepare our kids, particularly in grade 8, which would be the next area or grade level that gets assessed. And we're going to be piloting and utilizing resources for next gen at the middle school level. So the training I'm going to in July, just to go backwards, these scores that you all saw are preliminary. Some of the scores can change. They're going through standard setting and some other processes, so that's why they're only preliminary results. But when we get more information after that training, I'll share it with the board. Lastly, it was alluded to earlier, here are the assessments at the high school level. Here's an overview of the access testing, the same listening, speaking, reading, writing, and composite scores at the high school level. I feel like I missed a slide. No? So this was the first year that we used the College Board suite of exams across grades 9 through 11. So the benefits of that are you have a viable data set in grades 9 and 10 that we didn't have, the same assessment and the same grades. We can have longitudinal data from those assessments. The students get access to additional services through the College Board and supports like Khan Academy and AP Potential. And there's more opportunities and access for post-secondary options and assessment opportunities, excuse me. So improve student buy-in and parent buy-in into recognizable universal assessments. People know what the SAT is all about in the PSAT. And use of instructional time organized by, we give all the exams on the same day at the 2 high schools. That's something that Ms. Fitzpatrick and the principals have organized.
Yes.
Thank you. This is slightly new information for me about using the SATs, et cetera. We start those in 9th grade now?
We'll go through showing some of the scores.
But yes, the 9th graders are taking them, the 10th, like every
College
year?
Board Suite, the PSAT.
The PSAT?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's all part of a suite of exams, so you can compare throughout them as opposed to giving different tests to different kids.
Gotcha. And so they just take the PSAT every year, like 9th, 10th, and 11th, and then the SAT in 12? Yeah. Fascinating.
If I'm correct, the good news is it's paid for by the state as a standard test, so it doesn't cost us extra money.
Or the families,
Right.
it's
Well,
been a long time, but I remember it
I
cost
think they
money.
get one, but, yeah.
I only thought it was the PSAT test and the SAT that they paid for.
Oh.
I didn't know we gave it at all 4 years, but
Is it optional for students, or are they required to take them?
I think they have to take it in 11. I don't know about the other grades before that. I'd have to check. Mr. Brown, Mrs. Kutu, the 2 directors of guidance, helped put together the following slides on the assessments. So here you can see results of the PSAT 8-9, the PSAT 10, and the SAT, both with our district, state, and total group mean score. You can see our results are on level with the state. We have pretty strong participation numbers and outperforming national test participants across all 3 assessments. So mandatory state testing is, grade 11.
So, thank you. So it's been a very long time. What's the difference between the PSAT 8-9 and the PSAT 10? Because 25 years ago, there was just the PSAT and the SAT.
I would have to get back to you on that. I'd have to get some more information, so I can ask Ms. Fitzpatrick.
I think it's a practice test.
Yeah.
Sometimes they take it a year ahead of time to get used to it, because if you're going to college, the PSAT that you take in your sophomore year, grade 10, is the one that counts for the national merit scholarships and things. So often kids will take it ahead of time just to practice.
And so they have another extra, like the 8-9 would be the first practice, and then the 10 would be the one that goes for the scholarships, and then the regular SAT, well, it's changed since I was a kid, but
SATs goes for admissions.
gotcha.
Those are your admission scores at the total of 1,800,
Yeah.
600 per level if there's 3. If there's 2, it'd be 1,200. I don't know if there's 2 or 3 tests. So if there's just English and math, then it would be a total of 600 each, 1,200.
Is this a 1,200-point test or an 1,800-point? They're getting 1,000 out of, what's the high score?
It used to be 1,600, and then they added another, because it was 800 for math and 800 for English, and then they added is it a writing? I don't know, that was after I was a grown-up. But I think that one was also,
Well, my recollection for me is the same as you.
so it would be a 1,600.
But that's for you and I. Okay. Is this, because Doris was just mentioned 1,200, so in some instances. So do we know what you don't know for sure?
I can bring it back, yep.
Yeah, okay.
it was only SAT when I was in school. We didn't get a chance to try it out. So. And on 1,600,
Yeah,
My
that
mom.
score. And then if
Oh, I
there's
got that, of
3,
course.
if there's 3, sometimes there's a writing in one, so it's 2,400 is your new perfect score. If there's 3 components.
No.
See, that's why I'm trying to say, figure out if it's 2 or 3 components. What's the max score for these tests?
Yeah, well,
I mean, even if it was just the 2 and not the writing, for ninth graders to be taking out of 1,800, it's still 896 is a very good score for your first time.
well, you notice the assessment goes down from the PSAT down to 32 for the SAT, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the recommendations from the high school, more critical thinking and test preparation, longitudinal reporting on all the students. There's the capacity for instructional planning reports for teachers to utilize in their classrooms and for their instruction. Continue to have Saturday test prep sessions and increase participation with Khan Academy, which gives kids free online access for basically test preparation for the suite of exams.
Okay. Any other last questions, Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. Are we offering like Khan Academy videos? Are kids able to do that in school? Is that what that means? They're super fun videos, but.
I don't know if they're using them in school, but I think it's a support for out of school, but I could double check with the counselors.
Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. If you could go back one slide. We didn't discuss this one at all. So ERW means what?
English reading.
Early warning, no, early
We have math benchmark, and then it says ERW
benchmark,
in the
green
just
section.
top of
and
the
purple.
top of the column.
Is it English reading and writing?
Mm-hmm.
ERW.
Gold star, Mrs. Hohensee.
So here again, we're halfway. How can we get to 80%?
Where were we halfway?
Well, 51%, we're meeting, down to 32 for the oh, this is the page you
got
were talking about.
stupider.
Yeah. So it's the same question as before. How do we get this where these are flipped, where 32 are not, where 78 are? 68,
think the-
sorry.
Ms. Porter, do you have your hand up, or you just letting the blood rush out of your hand? Yeah, Ms. Johansson?
I think if we ask some of the teachers, I think the PSAT is a lower level algebra and maybe a little geometry, whereas the SATs might have a higher level math. I think that's where we failed, that not all the students that take the the test for the state have taken the prerequisite math courses,
Yeah.
would be my guess. I'm not certain, but if that's the case, then we're destined to not do well in math. We should have an alignment of, did they take the courses they needed to score proficiently or not?
Any other questions? Well, I'll tell you, Dr. McKinney, this has been very enlightening. It's been the most detailed report I've had on data, and I compliment you on that, particularly since you had to do it yourself. You didn't have 2 data analysts to help you. I really do appreciate that. Next month, Mrs. Oden has requested professional development discussion, so that will be the topic for July. And after that, the field is wide open. So if you have a topic you would like to hear about, send it on. Yes, Ms. Oden.
I've been reading an awful lot about vaping and the number of students that are vaping. So I'd like to know what we're doing in our health curriculum about e-cigarettes or vaping, because it is becoming even a national problem, but especially here in New England, we seem to have a big problem from what I've been reading. So I'd like to hear a little bit about our health curriculum.
Okay. Did you hear that, Dr. McKinney? Could that be a 20-minute talk? On
Yes,
vaping
ma'am.
in our health?
Yes, and we had the Department of Public Health, they presented to the admin team earlier this year about vaping, but I could get more information about the health curriculum.
Maybe you could bring somebody to talk about it for you? I don't know. Ms. Raymond?
Thank
I
you.
always have to look down.
No, I'd lost it, it fell down.
Well, it landed head up, so it's okay.
I don't see a date for the next meeting on our, sheet that came out, so I'm curious.
It's always the
The third
third
Monday.
Monday.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And that was requested at the last board meeting to have it added. I don't know, it wasn't on this yellow sheet?
Mine's pink, yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I
won't be here
requested that
week.
at the last board meeting, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Kaufman?
Just a data point on the vaping. As a substitute teacher in the Merrimack High School, I've heard the principal remind students no vaping in the building. So it's quite prevalent, and I don't know about course content, but certainly it's out there, and that's how, one way they were dealing with it.
So, Dr. McKinney, you have a couple of follow-up questions? Oops, sorry.
Oh, I just wondered, could we get this presentation we had updated for that last set of scores, or the SAS if you're going to recalibrate them, and just sort of put it in our packet? I don't know if we need another whole presentation, but just to see at least the full year and how our students are doing would be helpful.
So you're saying after this July-August PD, if the preliminary scores change, or you want to see
Well-
year-to-year comparison?
Year to year would be fabulous, but that's a lot of work. I thought if we took this presentation and just add, you said in a week or so you'll have the third eye-ready test,
Oh, I see what you
and
mean, yep.
then, in a couple weeks, you'll have the
Third trimester.
recalibration. Just so we have the data, and then if you want to do another presentation, the chair it would be wonderful if she authorized that, so we could see the cumulative year to year, but that would be more work. I just thought the update with the end of this year.
And if you could improve the nomenclature on some of those slides, be more intuitive, so you don't have to guess at what the field is, whatever the column is or whatever. That was one. And then we have a follow-up for Ms. Oden on the SAT question that she had. And did you have you had a couple of...
Well, one other thing would be what the ELL cut score is. In other words, you have a scale there, but we don't know what constitutes, I think there was a question by someone else, when do they get out, Ms. Raymond, when are they now eligible to leave the program? So that would be helpful to know. And I guess the same thing with the proficiency, what the scores are for the other areas where proficiency is called for.
Okay. The chair would entertain a good night motion.
Right, I move to adjourn.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We are now adjourned. Oh, all those in favor, got to take the vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
We're ready. It's 8:16. And thank you, Dr. McKinney, for keeping me to my helping, only 15 minutes over my usual 2-hour request. Thank you. Good night.